Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dave, Bath, and Beyond, where we're all about mortgages and more. My name is David Dowd. I am a loan officer, and my brokerage is Equity Smart Home Loans, and I own my own company, David James Investments, and I'm able to work with over 150 different banks to help serve clients.
And I'm Bathsheba Payoute. Great to see you again. I work with Groves Capital in South Florida, but I'm licensed to work all of Florida. And we have over 150 loans as well. We do wholesale mortgages, so we're excited to be here.
Quick disclaimer, we are recording this session on July 28th. So the reason I say that is because we're going to be talking about Fannie Mae guidelines. And of course, if you're going to use this information for making decisions for clients or as a client on what you're going to do with your home loan, be careful. Always check the guidelines. I'm going to put the URL to where we're going to be going today at the top of the screen at this moment, but just keep that in mind. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So today we're going over section B2-1.4, loan amortization types, and we'll only be going over the first two there. B2-1.4-01 fixed rate loans, and then later on B2-1.4-02 adjustable rate mortgages, or ARMs as they are called. So let's go ahead and get it started then with the fixed rate mortgages.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, fixed rate loans are very common. They're usually the go-tos for traditional loans. So what a fixed rate loan basically is, Fannie Mae purchases or securitizes a conventional full amortizing fixed rate first mortgage. Conventional loans are the loans that you pay, usually you do the 20%. If you put down the 20% down payment, then you do not have to pay mortgage insurance. So, and fully amortized means that it is a 30-year mortgage and you have 360 months scheduled payment breakdown. So for the payments, they must be structured as the following way: level monthly installments of principal and interest due on the first day of each month, and payments of interest in arrears. So these are your mortgage, and your interest rate is going to be the exact payment for the next 360 months. The conventionals are non-assumable. We talked about assumable before. Assumable mortgages is a type of home financing arrangement where an outstanding mortgage and its terms are transferred from a current owner to a new buyer. So I just wanted to add that in there.
So fixed rate, right, as you were saying, is very common in the mortgage industry, right? So a lot of folks will go for fixed rate because, well, fixed sounds good, sounds safe. And in all honesty, it is. It's safer than. However, why would we ever choose anything other than fixed if that's the case, right? Even if our risk tolerance is high, why would it make sense to pick anything else? The truth is, most fixed rate incomes, they have a higher interest rate than an ARM or an adjustable rate mortgage, which we'll talk about later in this session, or other loan products, for example, that are more risky. That's the trade-off. You have a lower interest rate for having a riskier product. That's kind of the bottom line. Again, we're going back to risk. We're always talking about risk all the time. And that goes for risk for the clients this time, not just the lender, right? Because the last time we were talking about this, it was like risk of the lender, position of the lien, and how much are they putting down? What's the loan to value? Things like that, right?
Right.
So definitively, let's talk about amortization, because that's a big word they throw around in the loan industry. And as Bathsheba was talking about, a lot of times it will be a 30-year loan, 360 months, right? They'll say that, they'll throw that around, but it doesn't always have to be 360 months. Amortization is over a period of time in general. So you can amortize a 20-year loan, you can amortize a 15-year loan. Like, it just means definitively, I'm pulling up the definition here just so that I don't mess this up for everybody. It says the action or process of gradually writing off the initial cost of an asset is amortization. So you're telling me that it guarantees that this thing's going to get paid off in this amount of time by making those incremental payments, whatever length of time that is, right? And they're like, yes, yes. But here's the other thing we need to keep in mind about amortization. An experience for people that they need to know about when they're going to get into these, especially longer loans, like 30-year, 20-year. The first 7 years of that loan is mostly interest. as far as how the math works out, the bank is going to get their money first. And
Yes.
then over time, as the principal goes down, they'll get less interest from it. But those first 7 years, they're getting their monies. So that's
Right.
why it's a great product for lenders because they can
Right.
make back some of the money and make a profit from that. And that's why it's so appealing. And it's
Right.
nice for customers because they have a long period of time to be able to pay off one of the most expensive things most people will buy. Amortization, long story short, length of time you're going to pay something off, and we're going to divide it by that many things. So it's years going to be months, right? And so on and so forth. And then with the fixed rate, the beauty of it is that it stays the same for the entire term. The entire
Yeah.
term. A 30-year fixed loan, from what I understand, does not exist outside the USA. It's like this is one of the only places that allows that.
I think Canada did just recently increase it to 25 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think I read that somewhere. So, but I also wanted to add some cool tips to our loyal listeners in regards to amortization. Great, David, for what you said. It is equal payments, and the payments are broken up, and the interest get paid first. So your first 7 years, majority of your payments are going towards the interest. Now, I'm not sure if anybody heard of biweekly payments. Was basically, instead of you paying it once a month, you break it down in two payments, that same amount. So if it's like 1,000, your mortgage is 1,000 with the principal interest, you break it down to 500 every 2 weeks. That actually helps reduce the amount of interest that you pay. I think it's up to it saves you like 7 years of payments, I've heard. That's always a good way to try to help reduce that interest principal, because now that you're making more payments more frequently, you're tapping into principal payments.
So biweekly, so like you get paid biweekly, right? So you pay your mortgage every 2 weeks essentially,
Yes.
religiously. And then
Yes.
you chop off a lot of interest because that's the thing. The
Mm-hmm.
interest is based on the principal amount. And that's why
Yes.
in the beginning you pay more interest than you do principal because the principal amount is so huge. And then over
Yes.
time, that principal amount gets smaller. So therefore the interest gets smaller. And that's how it works. The other thing I wanted to mention too, since we're on tips and tricks, since we're on the subject matter of tips and tricks, and we're talking about amortization,
Yes.
if you make one extra payment per year, doesn't matter what your loan amount is, right? One full, all to principal, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All to principal. So don't worry, whatever your mortgage is, let's say, like an example, $1,000, that's your mortgage amount. That includes all the things. But you say, you know what? I'm going to do a 13th payment this year, and it's going to go towards just the principal. You
Mm-hmm.
will pay off a 30-year loan on average in about 17 years. That's the
Wow.
math. That's the math. So you basically cut it almost in half. You're about 2 years shy. You do the weekly, yeah, you cut down the interest. You also
Mm-hmm.
pay it off faster, right? So it's all about
Yes.
what can we do, and what also you should also ask yourself, should I pay my home off, right?
Mm.
Because think about it. You think about the returns here. That's the thing you got to think about.
Yes.
If my money's all in my house and it's not in the stock market, and I compare those returns, that opportunity cost, right?
I like
That's
that.
that's a big one. You have to
Yeah.
really ask yourself. It's a very personal thing. But I can also tell you, paying off the house is huge because
Yes.
it eliminates what most Americans, most people in general around the world, it's like 35 to 40% of what they take in every month goes towards housing.
Now
So
50% now.
oh god, yeah, well, the way things are, right? So
Yes.
that's an ever-changing goalpost though, but at the same
Yes.
time, very true. It goes up a lot. And so you can eliminate that from your back, this big weight of debt
Yes.
off your back. And for a lot of people, that in itself is worth every penny.
Yes.
So we got to
Yes.
consider all these things. It depends
Yes.
on what you think, what you feel. You got to ask yourself that. And every great loan officer out there should be asking these types of questions to their clients as they're working with them. What are your goals? What's your risk tolerance? Okay, where do we want to go? Here are the products I recommend, so on and so forth. So if you didn't hear anything else from this conversation,
Yes.
as the client and as the loan officer, take away that we have to keep this in mind. What is the goal of the person whom we're trying to help?
Another tip and trick, just another last thing for
Yeah.
us to realize as homeowners and future homeowners, that once we complete the full 30 years, we've had paid that house maybe twice. That $300,000 house, we probably paid after 30 years, 600,000 because of interest.
Yes.
So please be mindful of these tips and tricks because they can save you a lot of money. Or like David said, it would be better to, put in the stock market where you can get 10% return, 12% return. Or if this is not your forever home, it's just a quick, which we're gonna go to the arms next. So
Mhm.
that'd be great to see. Hey, this is not your forever home. So maybe this will be a better route for me. So these are great tips and tips that we'll have on our show at David and Bath and Beyond. So we're excited.
One of the other things too we should note, because we're talking about risk tolerance, we're talking about, well, why would we do anything else other than fixed? It should be known that you can always go back to fixed later. That's another
Oh,
option you may have. So let's say when we're going into arms next year, and when we talk about,
mhm.
you're thinking, man, that's really risky, but wow, that interest rate's really great, even if the markets are crazy. You can always later on decide to refinance and then go back to the fixed rate if that's something you want to do. Maybe this is your forever home and you didn't think it was going to be your forever home. Things like that can happen. So just
Yeah.
know we can go in whatever direction life takes us. You just have to keep that in mind. So with that being said, we should now move on here. So to recap, fixed rate locked in for however long that term's going to be. That's pretty much what that means interest rate wise. And then from there, of course, the amortization was the other important grasping point, which is, you have a given period of time, we're going to pay off whatever that debt is within that period of time, whatever increments that involves, just so we have a kind of a definition of things. So let's go on to the ARMs, the adjustable rate mortgages here. Oh, I know, right? It's ARM day.
It's basically what arms we're talking about. We're not talking about these arms. We're talking about adjusted rate mortgages. That's what it stands for. And with Fannie Mae, it is a fully amortizing arm that originates under the standard and negotiated plans. So this is also negotiated, even though it's adjustable, the interest rate is adjustable, it is still fully amortized. And that's what causes it to be a QM or a qualified mortgage. That's what makes it falls under there, and Fannie Mae will accept it. So a standard conventional arm requirement is that Fannie Mae does not set a minimum remaining term requirement at the time of loan of purchase. So you have your initial adjustment period in months, which is usually the fixed amount rate. So what attracts people to ARMS is that the initial rates maybe for 3 years or 5 years, you say, oh, wow, this is really great interest rate. It's below the regular market, so you want to get it, but it doesn't stay that way. It's maybe fixed for the first 3 years, and then after that, it starts to change, either going up or going down. Back in the day, in 2008, they had no caps. So that's what caused such a ruckus through the housing industry, because the arms can go up and it can go up unlimited. It can go from 3% to 20%. And that was a big no-no, because that will cause consumers to go through a payment shock, which means, whoa, first my mortgage is $100. Now it's $500. Well, where am I going to get this extra $400 from? So there was no way to see what it is going to be, month to month. So now they do have a cap, which is they call it a ceiling, which is the highest it can go to, or the floor, which is the lowest it can go to. So in order to calculate that, they have the fully indexed rates. The fully indexed rate is the interest rate plus the margin. The interest rate, let me go to the interest rate first, is based on indices.
There have been a few, but I think
There's
the
been a
ones that
few.
are current, I think is two of them. There are two that have been phased out, and they still
Right.
reference them on occasion, is what the way they word it. But yeah, there are mainly two that we utilize primarily at this moment. Yes.
Right. And Fannie Mae uses the SOFR, right? The
Yes,
Secured Overnight Finance Rate.
that is
And
correct.
that you can find online. So that's what they use. So you have that rate, which is a standard rate. And then they have the margin, which is what your loan officer's broker will, their premium charge. So that's how they get paid. And that is fixed. So whatever that part that the bank wants to get paid from is what is fixed, but the index part changes because it's based upon the SOFI rate, which is similar to the stock exchange. It goes up, it goes down. So interest rates go up and down. So whatever that is plus that margin rate, and that's how it becomes fully amortized. Well, we have one study with you guys, so it's exciting. We're going to learn a lot today.
So adjustable rate mortgages are very complex in terms of the math behind them. I want to warn everybody about that right now, which is why we're going to have an example about this in a little bit. But the big thing that we need to grasp about adjustable rate mortgages, like we talked about in the previous section, is that the interest rates tend to be lower than the fixed rate crowd of mortgages.
Right.
Just because the fixed rate is the safer route, it's guaranteed, so therefore higher interest rates. That's the way that the lenders are looking at it. It's the way the investors are looking at it. When it comes to ARMs, though, we're, as the client, you're taking on a little bit more of the risk because at a certain point after the fixed period, you are
Right.
going to have to go with what the markets do. And that's kind of like investing in stocks. It's going to have a similar feel. It's going to some degree, maybe even feel like gambling because you don't
Right.
know what it's going to do. So always be very cautious about going with an adjustable rate mortgage. I would say that as a loan professional, make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into beforehand. Because if we know anything about adjustable rate mortgages, if anybody's familiar with Dave Ramsey, the reason he lost his fortune was because of adjustable rate mortgages. And that's
Wow.
he is always against them. Now, obviously, I'm not about, everything he believes in. I do respect him as an influencer, but I would
Yeah.
definitely say he wasn't careful about it. And that's why he ended up having such a big problem with all of his finances going away because of the adjustable rate mortgages he had. He had a lot of them. So what you have to
Yes.
do is you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. So like Bathsheba was already saying, and like this is saying at the beginning, there's a fixed period of a certain amount of years. And then from there, you're going to have to start going into the adjustment phase. And
Yes.
depending on how often that changes, that also can vary. It could be every year. It could be every 3 years. It could be every 5 years. Like there's a bunch of different plans in the adjustable rate mortgage direction. An important thing about making a selection for an adjustable rate mortgage, another good tidbit here is, let's say you know for a fact you're only going to be in the house for X amount of years. And we
Right.
also find an adjustable rate mortgage plan that happens to be that length of time. So like you're going to know you're only going to be there for 3 years because it's temporary or for whatever reason. Cool. Let's get you an adjustable rate mortgage that has a fixed time frame of 3 years or more. And then that way, when you move, you'll never have to worry about the changing rates because you'll sell the house way before we get to that moment of ambiguity, right?
Very. Right.
Oh my gosh. So that's one good technique that a lot of folks, even people that are very risk averse, they'll utilize ARMs for that reason too. It's like, cool, we get this low interest rate. Cool. I know how long I'm going to stay there. I'm very confident in my plan. Let's do
Right.
it. And then they either move and get rid of that mortgage, go somewhere else, or like we were saying earlier, they refinance out of the adjustable rate mortgage before that happens into something a little safer, like the fix. Maybe things changed, whatever the reason. So just kind of give you a bit of a spectrum of things and possibilities that kind of complements what we've already talked about. Beyond that, highlights of this page before we move on to an example problem. Fannie Mae is very particular about utilizing adjustable rate mortgages, as you would expect, because again, as we've said in multiple videos at this point, they are cookie cutter, right?
Right.
You want to have everything be a certain expectation. And that's what forms the shape of the cookie cutter. And then we just want to go down into life, the dough of life, right? The mana, whatever you want to call it. And they just want to cut into it and get exactly that same shape every time because that to them is safe. It's less risky and it gives them the ability to still help. That's a big thing too. Help the banks get more money to get more loans to more people to get more houses, right? So that's why they want that. And so, as you can imagine, they say, hey, it has to be secured by the principal residence or a second home. So we can go two steps here. It could be primary or secondary, but no investments, guys. Not for Fannie Mae anyway. Okay. None of that. And then from there, it goes into the kind of like very specifics about what Fannie Mae wants. So obviously, if you're a loan officer watching this, you need to read this whole thing. And you don't have to memorize it. Please don't memorize it. My God, that's why they have it online for us to access. But at least have like, oh, I remember reading that thing that one time. Like have it like that, okay? Talks about calculating the fully indexed rate, which we're going to get into in our calculation. So I want to save that for that. Arm disclosures, okay? Huge. You have to disclose things. And that's going back to what we're talking about at the beginning of this section. It's like, hey, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, okay? This is very important for the clients. It's very important for loan officers to advocate for that for the clients.
Right.
Super important.
This, the standard protocol for the arms is that you have to pay it. It's due on the first of the month. And the original maturity is no longer than 30 years. So the amortization for the arm is also 30 years as well. And there's no modifications. And I wanted to go back to the indices. So the SOFI is published at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And Fannie Mae takes the 30-day average. So I wanted to add that too.
What we should
another tidbit, if I may, calculating the fully indexed rate, it cannot exceed like 3% as well. So when you are calculating it, it cannot exceed 3%. And because it will fall into a non-QM, which is a non-qualifying mortgage, which is a Fannie Mae does not accept. Other lenders will accept it. The other brokers can accept it, just not Fannie Mae. It's not going to be backed. If it has to be, sold back, it's not going to be under that protected checklist. That cookie cutter.
There you go.
It always talks about. They're not going to accept it. It's too risky. The interest rate is too high. So the payment will be too high. It can cause a payment shock. Our clients may not be able to afford it. And now it's like, we're not trying to get people into homes that they cannot afford.
We should take a lesson from Fannie Mae and have our own version of the cookie cutter in our own lives when it comes to risk, when it comes to investing, when it comes to ventures, right? Venture capital, things like that. In a nutshell, that's basically most of what they cover here. Like I said, a lot of this, it's going to go into very specifics about conditions. And though we would love to go through each and every one of those things, it's a lot of what ifs. And what ifs are important for experience, but they can definitely be tedious when it comes to education. So I would say other thing that's important to note is it talks about pools, and that's really high level. But basically, MBS stands for mortgage-backed securities. That's Ginnie Mae. And we're just talking about, again, cookie cutters. What fits into this shape? This is what we want. That's what we're going to pool together. What's acceptable? That's what they talk about here, because they want to reduce their risk, they want to increase their profits, and they want to help people. Like, it's those strange trifecta of things. You wouldn't think those things all go together, but somehow they managed. And then indexes, or indices, as we are calling them, for the plural version of index, in case nobody knows what that means. Basically, it's like, hey, we're going to do this thing that's following something else, right? In this case,
the Federal Reserve Bank.
Federal Reserve, right. It follows the U.S. Treasury securities in the repurchase agreement, or repo market, as they call it. Again, really high level stuff. You probably won't be talking about this with your clients unless they're very inquisitive. The big takeaway, I would say, is know what you're getting yourself into. If you get an ARM, ask the questions, and most importantly, understand the risks.
The one thing about disclosures regarding a below market interest rate, the lender must show by example what is the interest rate would be if the loan had been adjusted at the time of origination. So your loan officer should be going through examples to saying you, hey, this is the highest it can be scenario, and this is the lowest that it could be. So that way you have a big picture. So you'll know, hey, if my mortgage goes up to $1,200 a month, well, let me do realistic, $3,000 a month. I can afford that. It's not going to be a shock for me. I can handle it. Because right now it's at $1,500, but it can get up to $3,000 a month based upon the adjustments. So that you should be able to see the best case scenario and the worst case scenario before you sign on that dotted line. Even the title company will go over with you again. Even when you go see the counselor, they're going to say, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Are you aware of this? So they do those extra protections to protect themselves and to protect you, as David always says.
Like I said, for a lot of people, they're going to probably be refinancing out of it or selling off the home before the fixed period ends just so they can lock in that lower interest rate. For a vast majority of people, that's what they use ARMs for. So, like all the math we're about to go over, unless you're going to stick around in the ARM for some reason, maybe it's advantageous mathematically speaking, but probably won't have to get this far, but just know that that's what you're up against if you stick around. If you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the comments. Make sure to like the video, give it some love.
Yes.
All right. We're trying to grow
Yes.
every day, make this as
Yes.
good as we can for you guys. Tell us what you love.
Yes.
Tell us what you hate. We don't care.
Yes.
Feedback's a
Tell
gift.
us. We'll
That's
work
right.
on it. We're learning with you.
That's right. We're all human here. Let's get it.
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to move on to a whiteboard where I'm now going to go over the problem that we have prepared for you here. So let me get that set up here next.
Mortgage educators and compliances. So shout out to them. So give credit where credit is due. So we're
Yes,
just
ma'am.
helping our clients to see better and, really wrap their hands around it. Because I know this was a new thing for me when I was getting licensed, like, oh, wow. So I really think it's very important for our clients to understand how it works if they decide to go this route.
Yes. And I would say before we even get into the math, I want everyone to know what's helped me with the math going through this is to know that whatever the initial interest rate is, like, forget about that once you get to the first adjustment. With the first adjustment, just pay attention to what it's talking about there. Okay. Because it's going to basically replace what the initial was. Because that gets very confusing. You think I need to add the initial to the first, right? No, that's not.
Right.
You'll see that it just takes the place of the initial. And I think grasping that concept ahead of time makes this math a little bit easier and not as confusing. So just putting that out there, that's going to make more sense in a second here. So let's go over the problem really fast. It says a borrower has an initial interest rate of 2.25%. The margin is 1.5%. Remember, the margin is the fixed thing from the lender. You were talking about earlier, right, Bathsheba? The lender. 1.5%.
Yes.
And the index.
The lender fee.
Okay, the lender fee, right. And then the index is the SOFR, as we've been talking about. The ARM has a 3 to 8 interest rate caps. And the SOFR, as it's abbreviated, at its first adjustment is at 1%. To follow its second adjustment is at 3.25%. And the third adjustment is at 9.5%. So we are going to be talking about the solution to this. Like, what are going to be the interest rates through these adjustments? That's essentially what we're trying to solve for. And before we go into that, we need to understand, what does it mean by 3 to 8? You see that?
Yes.
Number.
You're like, what is that? This ARM has an interest cap rate of 3, 2, and 8. And that's 3 to 8 is the percent. 3%, 2%, 8%. The first 3 represents the amount of interest rate can increase or decrease in the first adjustment. So on the first adjustment, it can either go up 3 or down 3. The second number, in this case is 2, is known as the subsequent adjustment. So on the second time it adjusts this, it can go up 2% or down 2%. This is the cap that represents how much interest rate can increase or decrease in an adjustment period that follows the first adjustment. So after the first adjustment, up 3 or down 3, then the next set will either go up 2 or down 2. And the third, in this case, is the 8, is known as the lifetime cap, adjustment cap. This cap limits the interest rate increase over the life of the loan. So it cannot go up or down no more than 8% on the last third adjustment.
The first adjustment cap is the first number. That's a 3. Technically, all of these are percentages, right? So 3%. And that's what the very first adjustment is. So once we get past the first adjustment, basically it's 2.8.
Right.
And now, when the first adjustment happens will vary depending on the ARM. We have the example here, but in other cases, maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, like maybe it's every year, right? You have to pay attention to that.
10 years.
Right?
Sometimes
yeah, exactly. Up to 10 years, right? It's crazy.
Yes.
A whole decade. And the subsequent adjustment cap is basically every adjustment after the first. So not
Yes.
just the second, could also be the third, the fourth, the fifth, how many adjustments you're willing to stick around for.
Yes.
And then, of course, the final number is the lifetime adjustment cap. So this is the maximum for the term of the loan.
Right.
Never go past that lifetime cap, right? So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at the math behind this in this example. The question it asks in the case study here is, what is the interest rate at the first adjustment, then the second, and then the third, as we were talking about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it reads, this arm has an interest rate caps of 328, just like we finished talking about. It says to solve this problem, we need to first look at what the interest rate is by adding the margin and the index. So in the problem there, we saw that the margin is 1.5%, and we saw that the index was referenced for the first adjustment is 1%. Okay, so those are the two numbers we need to pay attention to first.
Right.
So then it goes over and it identifies exactly what I just mentioned there. So margins at 1.5%, first adjustment's 1%. So the two numbers need to be added together. So you add 1.5 plus the 1% to get a 2.5%. I'm going to go ahead and get that on the screen here for us. So that's our first math for solving this is 1.5% the margin, as we see up here, plus the 1% SOFR, or the index in this case. And we add those together, and of course, simple math, 2.5%, right?
And this is our fully indexed rate. We needed to fully indexed rate. So we always have to find that first.
Yes, that is what this result is. Fully indexed rate for the first adjustment, it says.
The margin is always fixed. That is the profit that the banks get.
Right.
And the SOFI is adjusted. Remember, we can find that in the New York Federal Reserve, and they do the average of the 30. So you can look that up right now. It's a real thing. And that's what is always jumping up and down.
That's right. That's our wild card, if you will. Now, it does mention, it says, remember the adjustment caps of 328, as we've seen in the problem. The first adjustment cannot increase or decrease by more than 3% from the initial rate, as Bathsheba was talking about earlier, right? The initial rate was 2.25%, as we've seen in the problem. And the new fully indexed rate at the first adjustment is 2.5%. Since the interest rate at the first adjustment is 2.5 and not 3, right? It's below 3. The cap does not kick in. In other words, we do not breach the cap, right? We're below the cap. So therefore, it's an acceptable adjustment. And the interest rate at the first adjustment will be 2.5%. So instead of 2.25, it changes to 2.5. Yeah, it took the place of, see what I said earlier? Instead of adding 2.25 to 2.5, like I thought.
Me too.
Yeah, see, I thought it was 4.75. I'm like, damn,
me too.
That's what rates are not for me, But no. It takes the place of. So now it's 2.5. So once the first adjustment kicks in, whenever that is for this particular example, it will be 2.5 instead of 2.25. So it just went up by 0.25, right? That's what it's going to look like to the line. So we move on to the second part here. It says, well, hey, what's the second adjustment though? Okay, what is that? All right, so we're going to be in here. We say first, we take the margin again, which is 1.5%. Then we take the SOFR index at the second adjustment, which according to the problem is 3.25%, and we add those together to get the new fully indexed rate for the second adjustment. You just get that on in our whiteboard here. Hold on a second. Let me just.
This is the past the fixed interest rate phrase. Now, this is where you are when every year your arm is adjusting. So every year they're going through this, and well, not every year, every month.
Oh, well,
because you
depending
pay
on the arm. Depending on the arm.
Depending on the arm, So sorry, it could be, it's every year. So every year you're gonna get for the 12 months is at 2.5, and then next year it could be at 4.75. Now your interest rate, because they're always checking the arm 90, the 30-day. They're always checking the SOFI index and adding that to the margin, and checking to see are they at the cap or are they too below, and whatever number that matches is the one they're going to pick. So just wanted to add that.
Yes. On that note, I do want to mention that once we got to the first adjustment, so like the first part of the problem we just pasted earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that's when the army part of this loan took effect. That was the
Yes.
first adjustment. Every
Right.
adjustment is going to be what the arm ebb and flow is going to feel like if you actually go beyond the fixed period. So
Yes.
here we are in the second. My goodness, they stuck around for the second. Must be a good loan.
Yes.
They have a 1.5
Right.
plus a 3.25% according to the problem, right? So we just took the margin again, 1.5. Remember, it's fixed, like Bathsheba said, it never changes. And then
Right.
plus 3.25%, because in the problem it says that, hey, the index adjusts on the second time around 3.25. So the fully indexed would be a simple math equation. 1.5 plus 3.25 equals 4.75%, which is the fully indexed rate. Now, going to continue what it talks about here, just so we've got the full experience. It says, let's put it to the test using our adjustment caps of 3, 2, 8. Again, going back to that. On subsequent adjustments, the interest rate cannot increase or decrease by more than 2%, as Bathsheba explained eloquently earlier, from the first adjustment, right? So it says our interest rate at the first adjustment was 2.5%. Let's take the rate at the second adjustment, which we've determined is 4.75%, and
Mm-hmm.
subtract the interest rate of the first adjustment. So now we're going to subtract
Yeah.
4.75 from 2.5, and we're going to get a result of 2.25%. Okay? So
Mhm.
that's what we're doing there in the math. So just so you have a visual as I continue onward here. It says this means the interest rate adjusted more than our cap. It has exceeded now. And in the first example, it was below, right? Now in this
Right.
one, it has exceeded because we're at 2.25. That's more than 2, right? That's the
That's more
second
than
number, 2.
2%. It's supposed to,
Exactly.
yeah.
We breached the cap, right? So now
Yes.
we take the interest rate at the first adjustment, 2.5%, and add our cap to the second adjustment, which is just going to be the 2 because it's beyond, right? So we cut off
Yes.
the 0.25 and say, okay, it's 2. That's the cap, right? That's as high. That's our ceiling, 2. So now we're going to
Mm-hmm.
add 2.5% to the 2%, and we should get 4.5%. So there you go. There's the math so far. So there we have it. So on the second adjustment, guess what? Instead of, where was that before? 2.5. Now that's
Yeah.
changing to 4.5. We had to make sure we did the math because we had to make sure we achieved the cap. That was the importance. Otherwise, you could just say, well, it just went up by 2%. I mean, yes,
Right.
we're correct. But why? This is the why. Okay. It's very important to know
Right.
because it might not always
Right.
be
Because
that simple.
it would
Yeah. Oh,
have been
yes.
4.75, but that is above the cap that blew the roof off, and that would be too much. So we went to what we said we're going to be, to the
Exactly.
4.5.
So hopefully this is making sense so far. Again, you can always rewind the video if you need to. Make
Yeah.
sure that it makes sense. It's very important. Loan officers, this is probably the most complicated math you will have to deal with. Hopefully, other than certain percentages for other things,
Yes.
it's only that. Okay. All right. So next up here, let's talk about the final one, the third adjustment at 9.5 on that SOFR, SOFR, if my pronunciation of that is
Yes.
bad. It says, what's the adjustment for the third time around? Well, it says first we need to take that margin again. Hey, hello, 1.5%. Remember, consistent, right? Then we
Yes.
take the index of the third adjustment, which we know is 9.5% according to the problem. And now we add them together. So we have 1.5 plus 9.5, these are percentages, equals 11%. Get
And
that?
can you see how it just, the Sophie keeps moving up and down? And this is real life. It will
Yeah,
continue, it will move up and down like that.
yeah. In this particular example, it's just moving up, but right,
Yeah.
it can move up and down. That's this is true. And more real life, maybe it goes down. So maybe that's the reason they stuck around for the interest because they were like, oh, my money's saying it's gonna go down, and then 9.5. Sorry, better luck next time, guys. I just
Yes.
anyway, should have refinanced. So yeah, let's see here. So we got we're going to go continue the problem here, right? So that's our fully indexed is 11% on the third adjustment, okay? So it says this is where the lifetime cap would kick in, all right? So that's that 8 at the end, right? Remember our caps are 3, 2, 8. The 8 represents the
Right.
maximum amount of the interest rate can increase over the life of the loan, okay, over the life of the
Mm-hmm.
loan. That's why it's called the lifetime cap. Because remember, ARMs can even do month adjustments. So it's not just years. You can do it every month. So I'm like, whoa,
Every
I hope
month.
that interest is really low. Like that's really crazy.
Yeah,
Every
that's
month.
big risk.
It's super risky, yeah. So cut it off before that for sure. I would recommend. See here, to figure out what the interest rate cap would be, we take the initial rate, which is 2.25%. So now this is where the initial rate actually comes in handy when we're talking about the lifetime cap, okay?
Yes.
2.25%, and then we're going to add the 8%, okay? That is the lifetime cap. So initial plus the lifetime cap. So 2.25% plus 8% equals 10.25%, right? Now, why that's important, right? Because it's like, well, that's nice. This number would be the interest rate cap of the entire life of the loan. So 10.25%, guess what? We will never exceed 10.25%. Okay? That's why that's important.
Ceiling.
That
We were
is
talking
the
about in the
ceiling.
beginning.
Yeah, that's the definitive ceiling of ceiling, right? That's like the ceiling of the ceiling.
Yes, and this is the amount that we want to, like David and I were saying, this is the amount that you want to project in your mind. Like,
Yes.
can I afford this? If it gets to this price, will I be able to afford this plus my groceries, plus my insurance, plus my taxes?
Yes. So this is a beautiful thing right here. This is a simple way of seeing it, right? You look at the arm, you say, well, this is what my loan officer said. I said, great. So let's take a look at what's the initial and what's the lifetime. Add them up, find that percentage. Now, use that to determine, based on your loan amount, can I afford this monthly? Can I afford this? If the answer is yes, then maybe it's a viable option.
Yes.
But you also have to soul search a little bit inside you. What are my goals? What do I want to do? What's my risk tolerance? And then ultimately using all those factors, is this a good decision for me? Okay.
Yeah.
If you can't answer that as a yes, you need to keep thinking about it. You need to keep praying on it. Whatever you do,
Yeah.
meditate on it. Talk to professionals, get their opinions on it. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, whatever
Talk
it
to
takes.
us.
What's
Call
that?
us.
That's right. Call
Talk
us
to
up.
us.
Give us a
Call
ring.
us.
If you're in Texas, California, or Florida at the recording of this, so we may have more states later, give us a call.
Yes.
We'll have more information towards the tail end of this video for exactly that. Promises,
Yes.
promises. Okay, so we got our that's really useful math to determine if an arm is a good fit for you or not. So I really love, great point there, Bathsheba. Let's go ahead and move along with the problem here. So we determine, hey, interest rate cap for the entire life of the loan is 10.25%. Great. On our third adjustment, the new fully indexed rate is 11%, as we determined a little bit ago. This is over the cap limit, right? 11%, sorry, is greater than 10.25. Yes? So, but it says, remember, this also exceeds the subsequent adjustment cap of 2%. Okay? So this means our interest rate cap would come into play for the third adjustment. So in other words, it's going to be 2 again. So we're going to take the 4.5%, which is the second adjustment, as you can see there on the screen, and we're just going to add it another 2%, which will give us a result of what the true adjustment will be for the third adjustment of 6.5%. Okay. Kind of wish it went up and down in this example. That would have been kind of cool.
Yes, it'd been
But,
nice.
you know, it is what it is. And this could very well be actually better to know, because it's like, well, what if it just continues to go up? What would that actually look like? Right.
Right.
So there you go. There you have it. The answers to this case study. And you can use the same logic we had together on this in the real world. Okay.
Yes.
The numbers will be vastly different, obviously, but you'll know, hey, the margin's consistent. Cool. I know what my initial is. Cool. Take note of those things. Those things aren't changing. Cool. You'll always have them.
Right.
Now, the only thing you will have to pay attention to, as we've mentioned periodically throughout this entire video, is the index, or in this case, the SOFR, or whatever index your arm is referencing. So pay very close attention to that. Figure out what that percentage is, and then you have all the things you need in order to really figure out how is this impacting this particular loan. You know, you can use it as case study. So I hope that made things really easy for everyone.
Yes.
I thoroughly enjoyed this because it made it.
I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, right? It all
Yeah.
makes sense now. No, doing the NMLS test. I'm really hoping they don't ask me these questions on that. On
I
that
think
test.
I did have a question like this.
Oh, you did? Oh no.
Something more simple. It was more simple, but
Okay.
yes, similar.
Like maybe the breakdown of the parts and what they represent, things like
Yes.
that. Okay. Well, either way, uh, yeah, that's everything on fixed rates and adjustable rate mortgages.
I hope if you learned something. If you did, we did our job. If you have any questions, if you have any questions about studying for your loan officing license, let us know. We'll be happy to do a video about that as well. And just, it was a great session. I'm glad we were able to break it down. It was a great refresher. And thank you, David.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for joining me today, Bathsheba, and our Dave Bath and Beyond, our little corner of the world that we talk about mortgages and more. We're so glad to share this time with you guys. Thank you for spending your time with us. We're going to have all of our information around us at this moment, where if you want to be able to apply with us or reach out to us, whatever you want to do, guys, we're here for you. Again, as Bathsheba said, leave a comment below, like this video, share it with whomever you would find it useful. Maybe someone in your life is trying to figure out what they're going to do buying a house. This would be really big for them. Share us out there. Share the love, if you will.
Yes,
And
share it.
and if nothing else, we hope you all have a great time. We'll see you in the next video.
Yes. Bye.
Bye for now, guys. Take care.